So there's a lot to celebrate in technology today. I mean, as you've probably seen over the last couple of days. I mean, even in our own lifetimes, we've gone from carrying 100-pound television sets to now paper-thin, lightweight displays. We've seen computer processors be able to compute things hundreds of times, hundreds of thousands of times faster in our own lifetimes. But there's a terrible trend emerging in technology, and I think it's taking us away from what really matters. You know, I work in tech, so I'm partially to blame for this trend, and a lot of you work in tech, so you might be to blame also. But I think if you listen closely today, you can hear how we can move past this awful trend and build a better tomorrow. I'm a UX designer. To me, that means I do everything I can to understand your common, everyday problems, and then use technology to solve them. Right now, I do that at Samsung Design America, which is an innovations lab to create new products to solve your problems. And before, I did it at Cooper, which is a design consultancy in San Francisco. We work with startups to Fortune 50 to solve everyday problems for their customers. It's my goal as a designer to solve people's problems. But I think as an industry, we're losing sight of that goal. I think as an industry, we're riding a wave that takes us away from solving people's problems. And what's so fascinating about this awful trend is that it started with something so good. About 40 years ago, we had the ability to take hundreds of components and put them into a single chip. That meant we could build smaller computers, desktop computers, and they became part of our workplace. But unfortunately, we gave people an awful user experience. We forced them into command line user interfaces. And that meant they needed to memorize bizarre commands, language written by programmers for programmers. They needed to spew out commands like dir to the all-powerful growing computer. But then we got something great. Xerox Labs ideas converted to an icon, a window, a menu, and a pointer. And we got our first mainstream graphical user interface. It was so good. We could point and click. We could drag and drop. What we saw is what we got. And about 10 years later, when we could start touching our interfaces, instead of pointing and clicking, it was even better. But today, our love for the digital interface has gotten completely out of control. It's become our answer to everything. How do you build a better car? Well, slap an interface on it. A screen in the middle of your speedometer, so you can check things that are more important than how fast you're going, like your Twitter and your Facebook. This is an amazing promotional video. How do you build a better hotel experience? Slap an interface in your hotel lobby, a 55-inch touchscreen, so you can dig through menus of USA Today headlines that are supposed to make your hotel stay better. If you were at CES this year, you may have seen how we've made ovens better. We slapped a 7-inch Android-powered touchscreen on it, so you can watch YouTube while you bake cookies. And if you were at CES, hopefully you didn't miss the latest and greatest in toilets. This is the iPotty, a children's toilet with a screen on it. You know, somewhere along the ways, we got confused. We started thinking user experience was the same thing as user interface. And we started trying to solve problems with screens. And what that's led us to be is become surrounded by screens. Your desk isn't worthwhile if it doesn't have at least 2 monitors. Your smartphone isn't decent if it's not at least 4 inches. I mean, we have over 1.2 million mobile apps. It's come to the point where our greatest minds aren't advancing science or taking us into space. They're working on ads at Facebook. And if you're afraid that in death you're going to miss all of these screens, you can always get the kata combo, which is an interface on your tomb. It wasn't that long ago that our lives were filled with paper, and we dreamed of a paperless world. Now, instead, our lives are filled with screens, and I think we should dream of a screenless world. I actually think the best interface is no interface, and I'd like to show you how we can get there. I've created 3 principles. They're not about things or kind of technology. They're about us, because it's us that we should be designing for. The first principle is to embrace typical processes instead of screens. A couple of major car companies have released smartphone apps. They're supposed to be an improvement on the car key. And they let you do things, and they brag about things like unlocking your car doors. Well, let's just see how that works. If I was to use one of these apps to unlock my car door, the first thing I would do is walk up to my car. Then I'm looking to unlock my car doors, but I pull out my smartphone. I'm looking to unlock my car doors, but I wake up my phone. I'm looking to unlock my car doors, slide to unlock. I'm looking to unlock my car doors, enter my passcode. Sorry, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Try not to hack this phone. Still looking to unlock my car doors, and now I have to swipe through the sea of icons, trying to find the app if I can remember what color it might be. There it is. Looking to unlock my car doors, now I tap to launch the app. I'm looking to unlock my car doors, and the app loads, and I get this incredible map of North America. And I'm looking to unlock my car doors, and it's sort of hard to see on these projectors, but there's a middle icon there that says Control, and maybe that'll help me unlock my car doors. There's no way to really know. So I go ahead and tap on it. All right, now I've got a sort of a list item, and I'm looking to unlock my car doors, and right there, one of the options says Locking, Unlocking. Sounds like it'll probably do the trick. So I tap the button. Probably going to unlock my car doors, but actually it gives me this slider. One side is lock, the other side is unlock. I'm looking up my car doors, so I'm probably going to go to the right to unlock my car doors. Go ahead and do it. Now I guess data transferred is what it says there, but I'm guessing that means my car doors are unlocked. And yeah, now I can finally physically open my car door. This is the app-based, screen-based thinking that we all use. And we need to get away from it. So if you look at these steps, is this an improvement on the car key? I don't think so, right? And if we sort of break it down, let's sort of look at what happened there. There was me, right? And I was walking up to my car. There was the digital interface and all the steps that I had to do with it. And then there was my goal, the thing that I really wanted to do, the thing that I was looking forward to do while I was working with the digital interface. But let's say we embrace this first principle. Let's say we embrace typical processes and avoid screens. We'd be looking at something like this. Sounds kind of crazy, 2 steps. But actually, before we got caught up in all this screen-based thinking, in the late 90s, Mercedes-Benz created technology where you can pull your car door handle, it'll send out a low-frequency radio signal, and if your car keys are in your pocket or in your purse, car doors will unlock. So for the common everyday user, all they do is pull their door handle, and their car doors unlock. Some people say, well, okay, this sounds great, Golden, but the app is really useful as an alternative, as a backup, when you lock your keys inside your car. Well, the great thing about Mercedes' keyless go system is it knows where your keys are. So you actually can't lock your keys in the car, because it knows the keys are in the car. The entire automotive industry is filled with screen-based thinking. We have a lot of apps. This is one that's pretty popular. It's in CES. It won an award there. It's in AOL. AOL's Auto blog. It was an Engadget. It's called Viper Smart Start. And looking at it, it looks like a better app than the one that we just showed. It's got 4 common actions there. It's not beautiful by any means, but they're big buttons. You can kind of click and get to the thing that you need to be doing. But we think this is decent because we're used to looking at wireframes. We think this is good because we're used to screen-based thinking. Let's actually think about a typical process and look at one of these actions, opening your trunk. Right? And instead of screens, let's start with insights. This is what someone looks like when they're walking to their trunk. This someone actually happens to be Mitt Romney, but let's just say he reaches his ideal and becomes the everyday person. So here's Mitt carrying stuff to his trunk, and his hands are full, right? And he's in a rush, and this is probably pretty heavy. He doesn't really want to probably put this down, take out his smartphone, hit the button, go through all those steps, and throw out his back trying to pick this up again. A design team at Ford realized that when you walk to your trunk, even though your hands are full, your feet are free. So they put a sensor under the bumper, and it looks for a shin and then a foot kick, and the trunk opens. Good experience design isn't good screens. It's good experiences. Second principle is to leverage computers instead of catering towards them. Computers are incredibly powerful. They can calculate incredibly complex things. But we make them like they're 3-year-olds. And so they have a bizarre relationship with us. And they say things to us like this. This is a real error message from Microsoft. And it happened because of this bizarre relationship that we have with computers. It happened because we think we serve computers, and this is how we make computer systems. But I say, let's reverse this relationship. Let's have computers serve us. A couple of months ago, an emergency room doctor contacted me about a headlamp that does just this. You see, this doctor volunteers to do search and rescue. And sometimes that search and rescue involves cave search and rescue. And cave search and rescue is by no means an easy task. It sometimes requires crawling into small crevices, drilling out panicked survivors. And so this emergency room physician shared with me this headlamp. And it's made by a company called Petzl. Petzl has been making headlamps for over 40 years. And they actually have their roots in caving. And after 40 years of making headlamps, they didn't decide to slap an interface on it so you can check your Twitter while you're trying to save lives. Instead, they try to solve a problem. You see, when you're out doing search and rescue, your headlamp isn't the most obnoxious thing, but it's annoying. It takes you away from the thing you're doing because you need a bright, high beam to look into deep, dark caves. But that same high beam whitewashes your maps. Your maps define people. So what Petzl did is they just put a light sensor and a microchip on their headlamps. And when you look close, the light dims. And when you look far away, the light brightens. What this does is do more than remove an annoyance. It makes the doctor better at his job. You see, when we serve computers, we create databases. But when computers serve us, they can help us save lives. Computers can do so much more than that. They can help us do things that we don't want to do or things that we don't even know we should do. See, in the 2008 presidential campaign, Barack Obama said that we could reduce our dependency on foreign oil by properly inflating our car tires. Well, the idea was mocked by the Republican Party, who sent out tire pressure gauges with Obama's energy plan printed on them. But it turned out on this particular issue, Barack Obama was right. If we better inflate our car tires, we can actually save gas and reduce our dependency on foreign oil. Not only can we save money and pollute less by properly inflating our car tires, we're also safer. But despite this knowledge, a lot of people don't want to properly inflate their car tires. And I mean, some people have known about this for a while, and now everybody in this room knows about it. But it's not a really fun experience to properly inflate your car tires. You pull up to a gas station and you start pumping quarters into a machine to buy air, which feels like a really weird thing to do, and then you're kind of leaned over and you're kind of showing the world something you don't really want to be showing them. Nobody wants to do this, right? So what does a major tire manufacturer do about it? Well, Goodyear has an app, and it lets you do amazing things like print and email brochures. But fortunately, Goodyear has started to think beyond screens. And in their innovations lab in Ohio, they've created this. It's a self-inflating tire. While you're driving, a part of the tire looks to see if the tire is properly inflated. And if it's not, a pump opens and the tire reinflates to the right amount of air pressure, saving you money on your gas and making you safer to drive. Right now, they're testing this on commercial trucks, and they hope to release it to the general public. See, when we serve computers, we have to memorize bizarre passwords. But when computers serve us, well, we can reduce pollutions, reduce our dependency on foreign oil, and all sorts of great things. You know, the third principle is to create a system that adapts for individuals. Everyone in this room is unique. You all have your own set of preferences, your own favorite color, your favorite thing to do, your own way of getting something done. But that's not how we build software. We don't build software for each and every person. It takes a really smart team to figure out how to solve most things for most people. So what we've kind of ended up doing is trying to think that way. But there's another field of thought that thinks differently, and that's data science. It thinks about individuals. And it's let us do things in interfaces like make better LinkedIn recommendations, or even more appropriate Google ads. The data science can do so much more in the consumer space. Let's look at Nest, right? Nest has a UI that works for most people most of the time. But the great thing about Nest, and where I think it has its magic, is when it learns, is when it thinks about us, right? So as you adjust the settings, Nest learns about when you wake up and when you go to sleep, and you don't need to use the interface anymore. It becomes part of the background. You know, we can do so much more with data science than just learning when we wake up and sleep and what kind of temperatures we need. We can make systems that help you before you even know you need help. Last year, IBM worked with a rugby team in England. And those of you who might be familiar know that rugby is a full contact sport. And IBM could have helped the players by creating an interface where they have to fill out form fields like this WebMD, point where it hurts after it hurts, and try their best at figuring out what might help them. But instead, what IBM did is they put a sensor on every player, just a single sensor, and they wore it during practice and during games. And it monitored all sorts of things. And what it let them do was predict injuries before they even happened. So for the players, there were no apps to download, no passwords to memorize. They could just play rugby and get the treatment they needed before they even knew they needed it. So about a year ago, I published this idea in the Cooper Journal, titled The Best Interface is No Interface. And it got a lot of buzz. In 2 days, it was tweeted more than the totality of any article in Design Observer, and it got put in Hacker News Top 50 3 separate months. But I'm not the first to talk about this. People have been criticizing digital interfaces for a long time, particularly in the mid-'80s and early '90s. This is Mark Weiser talking about embedding technology into our lives. He's one of the most famous people to talk about this. And people have criticized different things through time. Some people sort of picked apart the semantics of it, and I sort of informally talk about UI and GUI and interface is sort of the same thing. If you prefer that I were to say the best graphical user interface is no graphical user interface, then you can say that. That's totally fine. But there's really two criticisms that I think are more interesting than others. One of them is automatic solutions. When I talk about automatic solutions, whether it's the headlamp or the thermostat, a lot of people get scared. And they should, because automatic solutions are really hard to get right. But when we get them right, they become an embedded part of our lives. Right? Automatically deploying airbags put a soft barrier between us and our steel-framed cars. Automatic sliding doors, we don't even think about. They open doors in hospitals and grocery stores, and we don't put much thought into it. They're just convenient. But probably the most interesting automatic solution is automatic transmission. You want to talk about a place, you want to walk into an executive room and say, highways are really, really dangerous, and I know a car is the most dangerous place you can be, but I've got a great automatic solution for it. This is crazy, right? An automatic transmission on a car. You talk to experts, right? Car lovers. They look at this thing and they call this a slush box, right? This degrades from the car driving experience. But you look at statistics and what's happened to automatic transmission. And by 2009, more than 91% of all cars had automatic transmission. People love automatic solutions when they're done right, but they're really hard to get right. And I think any good product responds to this second criticism, which is failure. Right? Any good product knows that failure will occur and helps solve that. And I would personally root for sensors and predictive analytics so you don't even have to deal with those failure moments. But there's another way people are doing it. And they're using user interface as a backup, as a secondary. I think that's a nice shift. For example, the headlamp that I showed earlier has a piece of software that you can use. And it lets you tweak the sort of levels of brightness in the headlamp. It's nice because it's not the everyday thing that you have to deal with, but it's a thing in the background. It's a thing you have to go to when the automatic stuff doesn't work. And of course, I showed Nest, the thermostat, and that always allows you to walk up to it and change it after it kind of learned about you. So if its automatic solutions aren't working for you, you can always sort of tweak them. And even automatic doors, if the power goes out, you can always push to open them. Another question is how, right? We talked about this great idea. It's kind of funny. It's kind of fun to talk about, but how do we really get this done? Right? If you're a CEO, a product manager, or a designer, you might be wondering, how can we think in this no UI kind of way? Well, when I first published the piece, I quoted something Donald Norman said in the 90s. He said that the problem with the interface is the interface itself. So after I wrote it, we kind of exchanged some emails. And I invited Donald Norman up to Cooper, and we had this parlor called What Good is a Screen? And we kind of debated. He took the anti position, I took the pro, and we had a conversation about the future of digital interfaces. And at the end of the session, I handed out this worksheet. This worksheet was to answer how, was to help people practice this kind of no UI thinking. It's based around the principles. So the first is to embrace typical processes, and one way we can do that is through observation, right? Mitt Romney. So I listed a set of observations, a set of common problems that people have today. The second principle is to leverage computers. We have all sorts of incredible sensors out there, and one way to do it is to leverage computers, is to embrace these sensors. I mean, you look at a product like Twine, it has a couple of sensors built into it. You look at something like Leap Motion, and although it's shown here with a monitor, it's an incredible sensor that can be used in all sorts of places. So I listed a set of sensors on the worksheet. Third principle is to adapt to individuals. And there's all sorts of great data platforms out there, right? And there's all sorts of incredible data sets out there. And one thing we can do is compare you to the masses and kind of help predict what might happen. So I listed a set of data sets that you might want to pull from. And we handed this out, and we gave everyone 10 minutes, just 10 minutes to come up with a revolutionary new design idea. People who had never met each other before. And some people came with some pretty silly ideas. I mean, one of the things that I threw out there was this problem around medicine, right? A lot of senior citizens have a hard time reading labels, which Deborah Adler has become famous working with Target and creating clear RX, easier prescription bottles to read. But another problem around prescription medication is that people just forget to take their medication. You may be able to read the bottle, but you may not remember to go take the pills. So one group came up with this idea that's a little bit silly, and they came with this idea that when it's time to take a new pill, the last end of your last pill kind of makes you smell pine and uses your nose as a notification system. A little bit out there, but a lot more interesting than the kind of notification systems we think about when we create screens. Another problem I threw out there was about running. Now, I'm a runner. I ran in college and coached a high school cross-country team. I worked in a running specialty store. And one of the things about running is that you only have one piece of equipment. It's your shoe. Right? In football, you have your helmet, your shoulder pads, your knee pads. But all you have in running is your shoe. And when your shoe wears out, it's not like your leisure shoes. The bottom of the shoe kind of compresses. And it's not as supportive, right? Your knees, your ankles can get hurt more easily. And so there's a lot of screen-based thinking around. This is a bunch of apps that are shoe trackers out there. And every time you go for a run, you can remember exactly how far you ran and type it in. And it'll tell you when to buy a new pair of shoes. But instead, one of the groups, being forced to think in a no-UI way, decided to put a dye in the bottom of the shoe. And when the foam compressed, the dye explodes, and the bottom of the shoe turns red. You know, they even thought you could put a small battery in there with a wireless radio, and when the shoe compresses and the dye explodes, the Wi-Fi signal gets sent out to Zappos and orders you a new pair of shoes. It was a little bit out there, and some people sort of criticized this and said, well, if this is the interesting idea that came out of your parlor, it has nothing to do with tech, right? It's totally unrelated. Well, about 4 months after, actually 5 months after the parlor ended, I got a lot of emails in my inbox. And there were emails about a patent that surfaced from Apple. They just happened to patent a sensor in the heel of your shoe that detects when the shoe wears out, and it's time to buy a new pair of running or exercise shoes, as they wrote. Nothing to do with tech, right? I mean, how many months did it take to come up with this idea? And what were the legal fees to file this patent? We had a room of people who had never met each other, and in 10 minutes, in no UI thinking, we came up with the same idea that Apple decided to patent. You know, there's so much to talk about around no UI. And so I'm starting to build a website called nointerface.com. I'm trying to cover 3 main things, right? What is it? What is this movement? And there'll be video of this talk. How do we do it? What are some case studies? What are some interesting examples out there? And finally, practicing it, taking that worksheet, sharing your ideas, and trying to solve these problems. Right now, you can give your email address, and in exchange, I'll send you these slides, video of the talk, PDF of the essay. You'll be informed when it launches. You know, I want to just give thanks to some different people. And if I start naming names, it's a little bit dangerous because there's so many people who have help me sort of bounce those ideas off of them. And I think anytime you think about an author of anything, it's kind of weird to say that because no matter who it is coming up with something, there's always other people they're bouncing it off of. So I want to thank my coworkers at Cooper, my current coworkers at Samsung, CCA's Interaction Design Program where I practice this talk, my girlfriend Megan, who helped me edit this essay at 2 in the morning a couple of times, and last night when I was stuck on an airplane at 6:20, she let me know there's a Southwest flight that was taking off across the other side of the airport, so I left that airplane, left my bag there. But fortunately, another friend, Spencer, brought my suitcase from Dallas this morning, so I'd have my clothes. The last person I'd like to, or last group I'd like to thank, is everyone who sort of tweeted about this No UI movement. You know, it's gotten me this talk here, and I've never spoken at any conference anywhere, so it's an honor to be here. And hopefully I've done a decent job. You know, there's so much to celebrate in technology, but there's an awful trend dominating our thinking. And I think thinking about these principles, we can start to think in a different way. Thank you, guys.